Welcome back to the Mormon News Roundup. I am your humble host, D-Baze, and yes, that's talent on loan from Kolob. In this episode, we dive into the fascinating world of apologetics and archaeological claims with a focus on one of the most hotly debated topics surrounding the Book of Mormon, the Nahom argument. Touted by some as the first verifiable archaeological evidence supporting the Book of Mormon, the site of Nahom has sparked widespread discussion, analysis, and controversy. Today, we'll explore the historical context, the evidence or lack thereof, and the broader implications of this claim. Is the Nahom connection a remarkable proof of ancient authenticity, or just another example of coincidence and creative interpretations? Stay tuned as we separate fact from fiction and examine how this story reflects the evolution of religious folklore in the modern era. Let's get started. First, let's turn to 1 Nephi chapter 16, verse 34, where it is stated,
"And we did again take our journey, traveling nearly the same course as in the beginning, and after we had traveled for the space of many days, we did pitch our tents again, that we might tarry for the space of a time. And it came to pass that Ishmael died, and was buried in the place which was called Nahom."
This is the only explicit mention of Nahom in the text. It is significant because it is associated with the burial of Ishmael during Lehi's family's journey through the Arabian desert. Proponents of the Book of Mormon's historicity highlight the discovery of inscriptions in Yemen referring to a tribal area called NHM, arguing this aligns with Nahom mentioned in the text. Critics, however, point out that NHM reference predates the Book of Mormon's publication and suggest the connection might be coincidental or based on Joseph Smith's access to contemporary maps or sources.
Mormons claim that Nahom is the best evidence for a Book of Mormon location. They claim that the Nim tribal area in Yemen is Nahom. One problem: Nim is in the wrong place. Nahom should be along the coast of the Red Sea, as the Red Sea is the one landmark that Lehi followed and documented from Jerusalem until they reached Nahom. To get to Nim from the coast would be the distance like walking from Seattle to Portland, Oregon, while scaling the 5,000-foot Hedjaz Mountains. The Nim area, at an elevation akin to Denver, Colorado, is arid and mountainous with scattered villages. No wonder they use bland maps, with no terrain, to present the Nahom-Nim link.
Much of the video that you're about to watch comes from a blog post on Patheos.com. Now, I want to give credit to Philip Jenkins over there on Patheos.com, who wrote an article about this called The Nahom Follies. Jenkins is a professor of history at Baylor University and is the co-director of Baylor's program on historical studies of religion in the Institute for Studies of Religion. The Nahom Follies story says as much about how an authentic academic find metastasizes into popular religious folklore, a lesson for mainstream Christians, Jews, Muslims, and of course, Mormons.
My favorite piece of evidence for the Book of Mormon is this. When Joseph Smith first wrote the Book of Mormon, there's a part in 1 Nephi where a family and a group of people is traveling out of Jerusalem and through the Middle East. And one of the members dies at a place called Nahom. Joseph Smith would have had to make up this word in 1827 when he was writing the Book of Mormon. But over 100 years later, they actually found a place in this section of the Middle East that's out of Jerusalem along the line that this family would have been traveling, and the place is called Nahom. It's a burial ground in the Middle East named Nahom. How would Joseph Smith have known that? He would have made that up.
Of course, focusing on the Book of Mormon's archaeology in the New World should be the primary focus, yet absolutely nothing has been discovered to date. And despite many people's explicit goal of determining the Book of Mormon's historicity, people keep asking the question, what about Nahom? Which for many apologists seems to be the ultimate validation that yes, indeed, there is something in the Joseph Smith mythos.
We have inscriptions that show us that it goes all the way back to Lehi's day.
What kind of inscriptions are we talking about?
So this right here, this is an inscription that was found in a temple in Marib in Yemen. This is a 3D rendering recreation of it, and you can see this inscription that runs along the top here. This is actually the ancient South Arabian script. It's used to write Sabian, it's used to write Manayan, a few other languages. Right here you can see the name Nahom or Nahom.
I don't see it. I see blue squiggly things.
Those lines, those represent the letters N, H, M.
What about the vowels? Is there a way to...
So in ancient Semitic languages like Hebrew or these ancient South Arabian languages, they didn't write the vowels, so they just write those consonants. So even on the plates where Nephi's writing, in Egyptian this is true as well, you would have just written the letters NHM to communicate Nahom.
So it could be Nahom, Nahom, like we've been saying.
Exactly.
Supposedly, this is a site where Lehi stopped in the general area of Arabia, quote, the place which was called Nahom, end quote. And in modern times, a related name with an NHM stem has been found inscribed on some altars discovered in the region in modern Yemen. The Book of Mormon, therefore, seemingly reports something that Joseph Smith could not have known in 1829. For instance, in 2014, Meridian Magazine breathlessly reports finding the first verifiable Book of Mormon site. This is literally the only case where anyone still seriously pretends that they have some kind of archaeological support for the Book of Mormon, though they should be embarrassed to do so.
Its discovery has been called the first archaeological proof of the Book of Mormon, the place which was called Nahom, new light from Arabia. So that's where it began. It was published, and those who read the article and knew the issue sensed immediately that in the name of the tribe, we now had confirmation of the name that Nephi parks in his narrative. That felt pretty good, I must say.
Meridian Magazine and others claim that Book of Mormon archaeology is no longer an oxymoron. Of course, there is no such link. Pure coincidence offers a more than adequate explanation for the supposed parallel, which, as will be demonstrated, is not even that close. When you actually look at the vaunted clincher evidence about Nahom and understand how tenuous the alleged connections are, your response should be properly, there is no there. And just what exactly was found?
Mormons claim that the Nim tribal area in Yemen is Nahom from their Book of Mormon. They say Nim must be Nahom because it's the closest in spelling on the Arabian Peninsula. Their argument: since Semitic languages don't always spell out vowels, the three consonants in Nim and Nahom, NHM, are a match. Apologists concede this link is an assumption. The exact equivalency of the root letters cannot be assured. One has to assume. They associated the sound of the local name with the term Nahom. Further complicating a Semitic link is that the Book of Mormon was written in Reformed Egyptian, an unrelated language of the Afro-Asiatic family.
Smith refers to a place called Nahom. The altar inscriptions, on the other hand, refer to a people or tribe. As one surprisingly sober account in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies notes, one text commemorates Abiathar, son of Saudum, son of Nahum, the Nahumite. The last name should refer to a family title, like Benjaminite, with no necessary suggestion that the ancestral family was linked to the burial site. Usually such tribes did not construct places bearing their names, but that's not an absolute. And that's it? That is the first verifiable Book of Mormon site?
I'm not impressed!
To give the authors credit, they honestly cite the inscription word as Nehemite, without pretending it was really Nahom. Yet despite this precise quotation, the story morphs and expands in popular retelling, until it becomes something like, the Book of Mormon describes a place in Arabia called Nahom, and now scientists have discovered inscriptions using the same name at that very same place. Wow! For Latter-day Saints, as for many other religious denominations, the internet has vastly accelerated that process of folktale evolution, fueled by wishful thinking. Even assuming that this was a close parallel, which it is not, there is no mystery about its origins. Smith was hugely inventive of names, even if he was pretty transparent about their origins. The region of Palestine and Israel is awash with inscriptions giving the names of people, tribes, and places into their many thousands. And so were the neighboring trading regions in the general region of Arabia, which were incidentally rich and fertile and quite unlike the grim desert of the Book of Mormon accounts. Just by the law of averages, the two lists of names, those proposed by Joseph Smith and historical reality, had to coincide at some point. It would actually be far more astonishing if none of Smith's invented names had a real-life counterpart in the general region of the Middle East. That correlation is all the more likely when you know how Semitic names work. Frequently, people of the region used three consonants without vowels marked, so DWD was the written form of what we call David. A name inscribed as NHM could be any of these variants. The odds of a coincidental correspondence are high. Let's hear from cartographer John Hamer.
Although some apologists have described the odds of this Nahom correlation as astronomical, it hardly even rises to the level of notable coincidence. The Book of Mormon derives its names from a book that has Semitic sources like the King James Bible. Many of the names in the Book of Mormon are just plucked directly from the Bible, for example Lehi, Laban, and Lemuel. Other names, however, use the Bible as their inspiration with alterations, for example Jerem, Omni, and Nehor. Nahom easily fits into the latter category. Nahom is actually a book of the Old Testament.
There has been a remarkable analysis of the shifting apologetic claims in the matter of Nahom. The conclusion is revealing.
To make this fit, we have to make several assumptions. A linguistic assumption that Joseph's English Nahom, which he allegedly translated from an unknown Reformed Egyptian language, is connected to the Naim tribe in Yemen. An assumption that there was a place in 600 BC named after the Naim tribe.
And here's one more conclusion from that meta-analysis.
Regardless, if the Book of Mormon's Nahom was a place named after the Naim tribe in Yemen 2,600 years ago remains a matter of conjecture.
Jenkins points out that one other critical point never seems to have been addressed, and the omission is both amazing and irresponsible. Apologists argue that it is remarkable that they have found an NHM inscription in exactly the inconceivably vast area suggested by the Book of Mormon. What are the odds? By the way, the Arabian Peninsula covers well over 1 million square miles. Yes, indeed, what are the odds?
Never tell me the odds.
Actually, the last question can and must be addressed before any significance can be accorded to this supposed find. When you look at all the possible permutations of NHM as the name of a person, place, city, or tribe, how common was that element in inscriptions and texts in the Middle East in the long span of ancient history? As we have seen, apologists are using rock-bottom evidentiary standards to claim significance. Hey, it's the name of a tribe rather than a place. So what? How unusual or commonplace was NHM as a name element in inscriptions? In modern terms, was it equivalent to like the name Steve, which is very common, or the name Benedict Cumberbatch, which is quite unusual? And were there 5 such NHM inscriptions in the region in this period? Or were there 1,000 or even 10,000?
Who the hell knows?
And that question is actually answerable because we have so many databases of inscriptions and local texts, which are open to scholars. We would need figures that are precise and not impressionistic. You might conceivably find, in fact, that between 1000 BCE and 500 AD, NHM inscriptions occur every 5 miles in the Arabian Peninsula, not to mention being scattered all over Iraq and Syria, so that finding one in this particular place is random chance. Or else, the one that has attracted so much attention really is the only one in the whole region. But until someone actually goes out and does some quantitative analysis on this, one can say precisely nothing about how probable or not such a supposed correlation is.
You're saying the Book of Mormon mentions specific cities, one of them called Nahom, and that there have been ancient maps that have correctly identified the place of Nahom, correctly spelled and in the location that the Book of Mormon says that it is and should be, and this all matches up archaeologically.
And to make an obvious point once more, the burden of proof on this and the chore of crunching the numbers belongs to the people making the claims. No one has an obligation to disprove anything. But the Nahom argument has also had a second and separate component, which must be treated independently. Here we go beyond mere coincidence to proposing a more concrete argument for a direct Smith borrowing. Evidence for an actual place called something like Nahom in Yemen or southern Arabia appears in European maps from the mid-18th century onward, so that, unlike the altar inscriptions, these were clearly known in Smith's lifetime.
They stopped adding Nahom on maps by the time that the Book of Mormon was coming out. There has never been a map found in the United States that has Nahom on it that dates the 1700s. All of these maps that have been discovered have all been found in Europe.
That's not true. That is not true.
A form of NHM shows up, for instance, in the travel narrative and maps of Karsten Niebuhr of the 1761 Danish Arabia expedition, marking a location in Yemen. An English translation of his writings appeared in 1792, and copies were available in U.S. libraries in the early 19th century. This Niebuhr parallel has been noted by a pro-Mormon source. Critics, meanwhile, point to the work's presence in U.S. libraries at the relevant time. Other European maps also show a related place name in the area. On the other hand, this fact confirms the existence of Nahom as a place, although only in modern times, not ancient. There's that little irritating matter of the 2,000 plus year gap between Nahamites, wherever they lived, and the Ottoman era settlement of Nahom. For the apologist's cause, though, this is also utterly damning. The map evidence makes it virtually certain that Smith encountered and appropriated such a reference, and added the name as local color in the Book of Mormon. Some European maps certainly circulated in the United States, and the ones we know about are presumably the tip of a substantial iceberg. There has not been a conclusive survey of all of the derivative British, French, and US maps of Arabia and the Middle East that would have been available in the northeastern US at the time of Joseph Smith to check whether they included an NHM name in these parts of Arabia. Following the US involvement against North African states in the early 19th century, together with Napoleon's wars in the Middle East, one would assume that publishers and mapmakers would produce works to respond to public demand and curiosity. So might Joseph Smith have looked at a map in a library, or been given one by a friend, seen one in a neighbor's house, discussed one with a traveler, or even bought one?
That's possible.
After all, there is one thing we know for certain about Joseph Smith, which is that he had a lifelong fascination with the Oriental, with Hebrew, with Egypt, with hieroglyphs, and with Reformed Egyptian. He certainly might have sought out books and maps by any means possible. Is it really far more likely that he was visited by an angel and discovered gold plates filled with totally bogus misinformation in everything they say about the Americas, but with one vaguely plausible site in Arabia? Occam's razor would say no.
Let's talk about Nahom. In 1 Nephi chapter 16, it reads, "And it came to pass that Ishmael died and was buried in the place which was called Nahom." Because the scriptures don't specify that the Nephites named this place Nahom, scholars assume that the place already existed, and that it may still exist today.
In 1984, a man named Warren Aston was commuting to work. For his bus ride, he grabbed an ensign dating 1978. In the ensign was an article by a man named Ross T. Christensen pointing out the correlation between Carson Niebuhr's map and the word Nahom that appears on it. Warren Aston was intrigued by this map and wondered if anyone from the church had done any further research. He soon discovered that nothing had been done and found himself a few months later traveling to Saudi Arabia. Warren P. Aston soon discovered 3 altars with the letters NHM inscribed on the side. This seemed like a huge bullseye for trying to prove that the Book of Mormon was true. But let's take a closer look at what's going on here.
Now, the chances of finding that exact name from that exact time in that exact place by random chance are just astronomical.
For the record, there are no vowels in the Hebrew language, so the letters N, H, M are all we have to go off of. In 1999, an article was published from the Maxwell Institute. The article points out that the inscription is not Nahom, but Nehemite as a family name.
The gazetteers of Joseph Smith's day listed no such place.
Okay, but wait a minute. Didn't Warren P. Aston find Nahom because of a map made by Carson Niebuhr dating 1763? So the gazetteers would have known about Nahom. From the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, they point out that in 1751, French cartographer Jean-Baptiste Bourguignon de Anville also made a map with the word Nahom on it. Also, I'm confused. Were the altars donated? I remember making a video for the Mound Rovers YouTube channel about Nahom, and I was trying to prove that there was no way that Joseph Smith could have known that a place called Nahom existed in Saudi Arabia. But the more I researched, the more I realized that half the maps I found predating 1830 had the place named Nahom on it. So yeah, that video never got made. Also, the great Warren P. Aston went on to publish this book, as well as this book, as well as this book. Just saying.
The apologist's stance on these matters involves some deep ironies. They go to inordinate lengths to stress the improbability, or allegedly the impossibility, of Joseph Smith having access to any such maps or materials. Just to make this clear then, issues of plausibility, probability, evidence, good sense, and conformity to logic and science are vitally important in analyzing any matters potentially harmful to the Book of Mormon. We need to be hyper-cautious, hypercritical, and eschew any speculation not grounded in precise documentation. And yet, Mormon apologists argue that by scholars attacking the Book of Mormon's historicity, though, then such criteria are unacceptable because they ignore the faith on which it is based. And of course, for a Mormon apologist, faith trumps reason. In fact, such critical secular methods are probably a clear symptom of anti-Mormon bigotry, or so we've been told. Ironically, the LDS Church makes no statements either supporting or doubting the alleged Nahom connection. Is there even the ghost of a case here that needs debating or answering? Obviously not. And is this really the best that LDS apologists can do?
That all you got? Oh.
How about a follow-up question? If Lehi's folks were still erecting inscribed monuments while they were crossing Arabia, why did they give up the practice together with all traces of their writing, technology, pottery making, metallurgy, architecture, etc., the moment they hit the New World? Were they really making a fresh start? And if they did keep up those skills and customs, where are the archaeological remains in the New World?
I have more I want to say on Nahom. So this video was released by Book of Mormon Central back in 2017. There was a very insightful comment that was left here by an individual who had gone to Yemen personally. His name is Andrew Davis, and if anyone has skills to track him down, I would love to know more. So Andrew did his undergrad in Middle East. He speaks Arabic, he's been to Yemen, and he says he's been to many of these supposed Book of Mormon sites. In this comment, he points out a lot of different things. He points out first that Nahom is not a burial site. If you Google where Nahom is located, it'll give you this longitude and latitude. This is my Google Earth, and this is what Nahom looks like. It's just mountain range. Try setting up a bunch of tents there. Or burying a person, for that matter. He also points out that the ruins mentioned in the video are way outside of Nahom. The ruins mentioned are the Baran Temple. It's also the Queen of Sheba's temple. And this is where the altars were donated. So looking at the map, that's a big distance. In fact, Google wouldn't even tell me how long it would take because it's just impassable. Andrew goes on to talk about how Nahom just does not fit the Book of Mormon narrative. He points out that there are huge mountain ranges between the Red Sea and Nahom. He also gives a picture of what Nahom would look like. And isn't that beautiful? That's just gorgeous to me, but that's Nahom. So don't go thinking that it's that temple with the altars. That's not Nahom. So really, if you have time to read this entire comment, it's very fascinating. It's also kind of frustrating how little has been written about Nahom outside of Warren P. Aston. Like literally every time I Googled it, it was only his name and only the Book of Mormon. So I know no one asked, but I wanted to showcase more of the maps about Nahom. This map was published in 1813 by John Pinkerton, and there is no Nahom listed. This map was published in 1785 by Rigobert Bonnet, with no Nahom listed. This is one done by Jean-Baptiste Bourguignon de Anneville in 1794, with Nahom listed. And I added this one, it was published in 1831 by Daniel Lizars, with Nahom listed. I figured that was close enough to 1829. And this is another one done by Karsten Niebuhr in 1774 this time, with Nahom listed. This map was also done by Rigobert Bonnet in 1787, so just a few years later, with Nahom listed this time. So yeah, basically I'm just really struggling to see how Nahom can be anything.
Jenkins has now coined what he calls the Nahom rule. Whenever desperate Book of Mormon apologists realize that their New World claims have failed totally, they will cite Nahom. Sadly, this too is built on shifting desert sands.